What is going on, everyone? My name is Andy. Welcome back to another FPL video. In this one, it's transfer tips for Game Week 23. So I'm going to go through some of the popular players being moved in and out of people's squads and give my opinion on whether they are good moves or not. So we've got Liverpool attackers, Nicholas Jackson and forward replacements, Anthony Gordon versus Brian Mbeumo, and a bit more. So let's get into it. So let's start with Liverpool attackers. They've got Ipswich at home in Game Week 23, followed by that double in 24, Bournemouth away and Everton away, and then Wolves at home in Game Week 25. So even if you think that double is not as good as it could be because it's two away games, the fact they've got two nice home games sandwiched either side just makes it well worth looking at a triple up on Liverpool. Longer term, City away in 26, Newcastle at home in 27. Not as easy, but not terrible. And then Southampton at home in 28. So things look pretty good over the next 6 game weeks. Just to quickly run through the graphic I've got on screen, Salah's a no-brainer. Everyone should own him for this double if you're not already. Chiesa is on there just to fill the graphic. Nobody should be looking at him. He may get a little bit more game time over the next few weeks if he can stay fit, but it's not going to be a massive impact, in my opinion, on the other players. And Jota's not on the list because Slot said yesterday that he's injured and he's going to be out for weeks, not months. So it's not a super long-term injury, but he's definitely not an option for the next few weeks. So if you've got Jota, sell him. And if you don't have him, don't buy him. Simple as that. So looking at the 3 remaining players, it's Gakpo, Diaz, Darwin. Darwin Núñez has muddied the waters a little bit by coming off the bench against Brentford and scoring 2 goals. Because before that, it felt like he was pretty much out of the picture. That might make Arne Slot take notice of him a bit more and give him a few more minutes. The only thing I would say is Liverpool have got quite a few fixtures coming up in and around Game Weeks 23 to 25. And I just think Darwin will start the majority of those games instead. So it'll be interesting to see what the Champions League lineup is tonight, because basically Liverpool can secure top 8. They're pretty much going to get top 8 anyway, but this will make it mathematically done. Then you've got the Ipswich game in Game Week 23. Then it's PSV away. So if you've already got top 8 secure, that's probably mass rotation in that game. Then it's the Bournemouth game. Then Carabao Cup. Maybe Arne Slot treats that a bit differently now because they're behind. There still will be probably a bit of rotation in that game. Then you've got the Plymouth FA Cup match, mass rotation. Then it's the Everton game. Then it's the Wolves one. So I think Darwin has got a pretty good chance of starting like Plymouth, the PSV away game, maybe tonight, possibly the Carabao Cup. I think the majority of Premier League matches will still be similar to what we've seen recently, Diaz and Gakpo. Now, nobody can guarantee you they're going to start all the games, but Gakpo in particular has started every game since Game Week 12 and averaged about 74 minutes. So if we're trying to guess who's going to get the majority of minutes, 23 to 25, it probably is Gakpo. I think most people would agree with that. And also he takes up a forward spot, which right now I think is pretty handy for people, especially if you've got like Solanke or Jackson. It's just such an easy swap to go to Gakpo instead. So he's probably the second attacker that I would go for. If you think Darwin's going to get more minutes, it's definitely going to be at number 9, which means Diaz comes out of that position. He'll then be fighting with Gakpo, and it does feel like Gakpo is ahead of Diaz for the left wing spot right now. But of course, it doesn't mean that Diaz is just going to come out of the team. So he probably is the best midfielder to go for. Gakpo's the best forward. But there is going to be a sharing of minutes over the next few weeks. The hope is that Darwin will just get a majority of minutes in those non-Premier League games, leaving Diaz and Gakpo to play the majority in the Premier League. Is it going to work out like that? Probably not. Is there going to be some frustration along the way? Probably. And I don't think that a second Liverpool attacker is essential. I still think going double up on defence is worthwhile too, like Trent and Alisson or Trent and Van Dijk. Possibly Trent and Konate, but Konate worries me a little bit fitness-wise. So if I was picking a second Liverpool attacker, it would almost certainly be Gakpo right now. If I was going for a different one, it would be Diaz. I just think there's lots of good midfielders right now. I'm not sure I would want to take a spot up with Diaz. So Gakpo's probably the one. Darwin, we've been here before. I just don't trust the minutes despite the 2 goals off the bench. So a few people have started to sell Raúl Jimenez, nearly 100,000 transfers out so far this week. A blank against Leicester in Game Week 22, a blank against West Ham in Game Week 21. Not ideal, but he is continuing to start ahead of Menez. We know he's on penalties. The minutes are usually around 70 to 75 per game. 5.7 million is still pretty good value. I think with Jimenez, he's kind of in that position where it's okay to hold, but it's also okay to sell, especially if you're going to like a Gakpo or an Isak. I think that's a pretty standard transfer. If you've got the money to do that, that's probably well worth doing. If you're just moving Jimenez to someone else like a Vissel or a Mateta or someone like that, it's also fine. But 5.7 million is still pretty good value. That's allowing you to spend money elsewhere. 3 of the next 4 fixtures are at home. Man United, Forest and Crystal Palace. The away game is Newcastle in 24. It's not an amazing fixture run, but it's not terrible either. I think at 5.7, he's still representing good value. But ultimately, I wouldn't sit here and tell you that he's got to be held. If you want to sell him, I think that's fair enough. And I'm going to talk about which forward options to look to bring in later on. So Nicholas Jackson's another forward with quite a few transfers out this week, nearly 160,000 so far. It's now just 1 goal, 1 assist in the last 8 game weeks. That is not ideal for the price that he costs. And I do think owners have been a bit unlucky. Like, there was a period between game weeks 15 and 19 where the minutes weren't great, but he's just played back-to-back 90 minutes against Bournemouth and Wolves. Chelsea have scored 5 goals, and he's walked away with 1 assist and 6 points total. It is just a bit unlucky, but also this does feel like quite a nice time to jump off of him. The price is coming down. It's already dropped to 7.9 million overnight. That will continue to happen for every game week where he doesn't get returns. And Man City away in 23 just feels like a nice jump-off point. Usually I'd be looking at the longer-term fixtures, saying he might be worth holding, because West Ham at home in 24 is good. Brighton away and Villa away in 25 and 26, not terrible. Southampton at home and Leicester at home in 27, 28 looks great. The problem is that Southampton game in 27 is a midweek fixture. So there's no guarantee that Jackson will play. And there's a gap between game weeks 27 and 28, but that will probably be filled with an FA Cup match for Chelsea. And if that's a tough game, there's every chance Jackson will miss 27. And that is a bit of a worry. And even if you frame it that, well, Maresca rotated against Ipswich, they lost, he won't do that again, I guarantee that Jackson owners will be checking the team sheet in 27, which tells you they're not 100% certain he's going to start. So if you lose that Southampton game, and the fact you got City away this week, the next 5 game weeks don't look quite so good. So reluctantly, I'd probably say that Jackson is a sell this week, depending on other issues you've got. Like if you've got Jackson and Solanke, you're obviously selling Solanke first because he's injured. But I don't think it's the worst time to jump off. The obvious move is to go to Gakpo. It almost feels too obvious, but I quite like it this week if you're happy with double Liverpool attack. If you want to look at a different forward, Mateta, stats are okay. He's on penalties. The next few fixtures are good. Brentford at home, Man United away, Everton at home, Fulham away. After that, they've also got 2 pretty good games, I think. It is Villa at home and Ipswich at home. They are quite likely to blank in game week 29, so keep in mind what your chip strategy is going to be for that week, how many other players you've already got that may blank. But in terms of the next 6 game weeks, I think Mateta looks quite good. If you're prepared to risk your health, you could go for Calvert-Lewin. Not someone you'd necessarily want to bring in to play in 23 with Brighton away, but they've got that double in 24. So maybe you're doing like Jackson to Calvert-Lewin to give you the money to go and get Van Dijk in defence, or Alisson as a goalkeeper upgrade, something like that. I don't hate it, especially if Calvert-Lewin becomes your 8th attacker that you bench most weeks. João Pedro actually doesn't look too bad over the next 4 at his price. They've got Everton at home, Forest away, Chelsea at home, Southampton away. Like Raúl Jimenez, he's still pretty good value. But the stats this season have been quite underwhelming. I don't think Brighton have been as good as we think they are. But they do have Everton at home this week and Southampton away in 26. So it's not a bad option. I'm just not, like, I don't know, if João Pedro is going to be your 8th attacker, I can't believe I'm going to say this. I'd almost just buy Calvert-Lewin instead and just take the double. I don't know, maybe that's a stupid thing to say. I think João Pedro is okay to hold. I'm just not sure I'd bring him in right now. Visser I quite like. I think Brentford have been very good in attack. His underlying numbers are incredible. 0.61 expected goals per 90. That's almost double what Mateta and Chris Wood are. Like, that's crazy. He scored plenty of goals already. Palace away, Spurs at home, West Ham away, Leicester away. Again, not amazing because there's 3 away games in the next 4, but I do like him for his price. Chris Wood, I don't think I can ever sit here and say it's a bad time to bring him in, but it is 3 away games next 4, Bournemouth, Fulham and Newcastle. That's just a lot more difficult than Palace, West Ham and Leicester for Wisser, and Chris Wood's way more expensive now as well. Like, the guy is probably just going to continue smashing goals every single week, but I don't know. I would say some Chris Wood owners are going to bench him this week, maybe even look to get rid. Not many of you, but probably some of you. I wouldn't buy Chris Wood this week. I'm just going to say it. And it's probably going to come back to haunt me again, but I wouldn't do it. And then I've got Havertz on there. Good numbers. Has just scored again. The fixtures for Arsenal are pretty good. My main thing with Havertz is he's the kind of player that people get frustrated with very quickly. He's one of those that everyone's just got it in their mind that he's a really bad finisher. He's not going to score enough goals. So if you bring him in and he does badly, it's just going to be a price drop straight away. And also, it's Wolves away, City at home. I think if you're going to go for Arsenal players, you probably buy them in 25 for a Leicester away. So if I was buying someone on this list, if I didn't want to damage my health by going for Calvert-Lewin because he's just so frustrating, I'd probably go for Mateta or Visser as top 2 if you're not going for Gakpo. So I've just mentioned Visser as a possible forward option. If you need a new midfielder this week, Bryan Mbeumo is definitely worth considering at 7.8 million. Nearly 80,000 people have already brought him in this week. I know people are going to mention Mbeumo and Brentford's away record, and 3 of the next 4 are away, Palace, West Ham and Leicester. But on paper, that is not terrible. And let me just remind you, the last away game that Brentford played was against Southampton when Mbeumo got a 19-pointer. Now, I'm not saying that's going to happen again, but when you look at the away games that Brentford have played so far, it's no surprise their record at home is better. They've played Liverpool, Man City, Spurs, Man United away, Fulham away, Everton away, Villa away, Chelsea away, Brighton away, and then Southampton away where they absolutely smashed it. That is not a great run of away fixtures. They've got most of the difficult ones done now. It gets a bit easier. Then you've got Spurs at home in 24, not bad. Everton at home in 27, pretty good. Villa at home in 28 is not terrible either. And they play in 29 against Bournemouth away. So I really like Mbeumo. The guy plays 90 minutes every single week. He's on penalties. The stats are down from last year, but they're not terrible. 0.2 expected goals per 90, non-penalty. 0.23 expected assists. So 0.43 expected goal involvement for a player that always plays 90. I think he looks pretty good. The only thing I will say, to provide a little bit of balance, because I say the same thing about players like Chris Wood, etc., Mbeumo has massively overperformed so far this year. Like his XG non-penalty per 90 is 0.2. His goals per 90 are 0.59, right? Even if you look on the FPL page, which includes penalty XG, it's 6.8 XG total, 13 goals. He's overperforming, right? And I would not be surprised at some point if the returns slow down. But I think when you look at him as an option, if we forget about what's happened in the past, the stats are still good, the minutes are good, the penalties are there, the fixtures are good. Like, there's really no negatives to say about him. I just think he's a really good pick right now and a solid option over the next 6-7 games where you just put him in and you forget about him unless he gets injured. So Anthony Gordon's another midfielder that people are looking to bring in this week. Just over 60,000 transfers in so far. Interestingly, though, he's had nearly 50,000 transfers out as well, which makes absolutely no sense to me when it's Southampton away in game week 23. If you're doing Gordon to Salah, then fair enough. But any other midfielder, I just don't think it's worth it. Even if you're doing Gordon to Diaz, I'd rather just keep Gordon because you're quite likely to get 90 minutes against Southampton. You're not guaranteed 90 minutes for Diaz against Ipswich. So I would just put that transfer off until game week 24. So if you've got Gordon, I think he's a very, very easy hold. The bigger conversation is, do you still bring him in if you don't already own him? Because after Southampton away, the fixtures do get a bit trickier. It's Fulham at home in 24, City away in 25, Forest at home in 26, Liverpool away in 27, and West Ham away in 28. And then in game week 29, Newcastle are quite likely to blank because they're 2-0 up against Arsenal in the Carabao Cup semi-final, and the second leg is at home. So if they get through to the final, they won't play in 29. So Southampton good, but the fixtures in between that and the blank are not as ideal. Now, don't get me wrong, right? If I had Gordon going into game week 24, Fulham at home's fine, right? You're probably more than happy to play him in that if you don't have a spare transfer to sell him to someone better. But buying him new with those 5 game weeks, including City away and Liverpool away, I don't think it's worth it. So if you're looking at, say, Mbeumo at 7.8 and Gordon at 7.7, I'm probably going to take Mbeumo as the better option. It's short-term pain because Gordon will probably outscore him this week. But as a long-term option, including the fact that Brentford will play in 29 and Mbeumo's on penalties, I think he is the better option. If Wilson can't get fit and Isak ends up getting injured, Gordon will then be on penalties as well. But we know Mbeumo is. And he's guaranteed 90 pretty much every week. So I think you can absolutely keep Gordon. In fact, I would urge you to not selling this week. And I'm very scared of not owning him. But I don't know if I would bring him in. I just don't know if it's the right time to jump on a Newcastle player like this, especially if the decision is between him and Mbeumo. I would just take the hit this week and just hope that long term I gain more points. And please don't get me wrong, right? Gordon is not a bad option. If you want to bring him in, you absolutely should. Just be conscious of that blank in 29 and the more difficult fixtures before that. So Aina at Nottingham Forest is seemingly unstoppable. Forest finally concede 2 goals to Southampton and he still ends up getting an assist and finishing on 4 points. He's the top scoring defender in FPL, cost 5.3 million. He has been incredible value and he's actually about to go up to 5.4 million as well. I don't know if it will happen tonight, but before the deadline, he probably will be 5.4 million. This is surely the wrong time to buy him now. It's got to be the time where we avoid Nottingham Forest defenders. If you're already an owner, great. You've had brilliant value out of him. You probably don't want to look to rush into selling him. I get that. You're probably more than happy if you have to play him over one of the next 3 game weeks, Bournemouth away, Brighton at home, Fulham away. But if someone looking to buy a defender right now, that fixture run is just not good. Like, Forest have been a brilliant defence so far this year, but like Arsenal, bad fixtures mean the clean sheets are less likely. Arsenal have also had fantastic stats for most of this season. Last 4 game weeks, no clean sheets. Like, if I had an Arsenal defender with the fixture on Forest have got, I'd be worried about where those clean sheets are coming from. I'd be relying on attacking returns. Now, to be fair, Aina does have quite a few attacking returns, 2 goals, 1 assist, but his underlying numbers don't strike me as a player that's going to continue to get lots of those attacking returns. So, fair enough if you want to keep him. I wouldn't be sat here urging you to sell him at all costs. But I just wouldn't bring him in. There's much better defenders out there. You can go and get your second Liverpool defender. From next week, you could go and get your Everton defender for the double in 24, which includes Leicester at home. Like, Crystal Palace have better fixtures than Nottingham Forest. I just feel like there's loads of better options than going for Aina. And I know I've got it wrong on Forest players a lot this season. Although, to be fair, a while ago I did say Aina was more than good enough to bring in. But even if I was bringing in a Forest defender, I would just go for Milenkovic instead because he's cheaper. Yeah, the fixtures are rubbish. Just don't buy a Forest defender, in my opinion. Often my opinion is wrong. If you want to go there, go for it. If you enjoyed that video, make sure to give it a like. Hit that subscribe button if you haven't done so already, and rate 5 stars if you're listening on podcast. I'll be back tomorrow with a game week preview, so I'll catch you then.